First thing I was kind of curious about is just how's the campaigning been for you as of late?
Yeah, I think it's going very well. We are 2 weeks out from the primary on June 4th, and I've been to all 36 counties and definitely have a groundswell of support building up with certainly with the active voters out there who are really paying attention, and I think we're doing a great job of reaching the people who just started paying attention recently. So I'm very very excited about the progress we've made.
And for folks who might not know, what do you currently do for work, or what did you do for work?
So I spent the last 10 years building a small business that sells software to the private sector, but also to some government agencies, primarily with the military. And I took a step back from that. I'm still an owner in the business, but I took a step back from running it when I decided to run for Congress.
And you were in the Army for a while as well, correct?
That's right.
How long were you in the Army for?
Well, I went to West Point after high school, which is it's a 4-year education. Then I served in the Army for 5 years afterward.
Hmm. And what did you appreciate about working in the Army?
Um, I don't know, being warm and dry, I suppose.
Mhm.
No, it was the best job I could have had, starting out after high school. I think I learned an awful lot about about leadership, discipline, resilience, how to manage people, how to help, and how to build and manage teams. I was fortunate to have some extremely effective leaders above me, and I learned a lot from them.
Mhm. And you mentioned where you went to college. Where did you go to high school at?
I went to South O'Brien High
Okay,
School in O'Brien County.
gotcha. And where do you live at now?
I moved back to Sutherland,
Mhm.
so I live not far from my parents on a farm outside of Sutherland, right back here in O'Brien County.
Gotcha. And how long have you been back there for now?
Well, I moved back here late last year
Mhm.
when I first decided to run. Right, I make no secret of the fact that I was living outside of the state until I made that decision. Right, I was hoping that somebody else would step up and run against Congressman Feenstra, but it became obvious by mid-December of last year that nobody was going to do that, and I really thought that someone needed to. So I've been considering a move back here anyway, so that just made it easy.
Yeah. And why ultimately did you think you should be the one to run? I know you kind of said nobody was running, but what kind of finally made you decide on that?
Yeah, well, I think that's right. I think if there would have been a credible opponent out there who I thought would have been able to defeat Feenstra, I would have happily, ceded the opportunity to them. But nobody stepped up. I mean, what do I think makes me credible? Certainly, I think I've got a strong record of public service, and I've been a leader both in the private sector and and in government, having served twice now on two different occasions. Um, and I think I've got a very, having grown up here, I think I've got a very, very strong, grounding and a Christian work ethic, having grown up on a farm, and a very good understanding of the national levels that are impacting our country right now, and increasingly a great understanding of what's happening here in the state.
Is there anyone who kind of ultimately convinced you, like Kevin, you should do this?
I would say there was one single person that convinced me, but a lot of people encouraged me. Certainly, my family, my dad is part of this group, of just local, let's call them business leaders, where he lives, and all of them are very encouraging. I got to know former Congressman Steve King, just through all of his activism with regard to the carbon capture pipelines, which I'm sure you're familiar with. He was encouraging as well. And then, yeah, I had a lot of conversations around the districts. People who were excited, with the possibility of somebody to run against Feenstra. It says something that 2 days after I announced, well, actually 2 days after I publicly disclosed that I intended to run, over 150 people showed up at my campaign announcement speech, in a tiny little town here in O'Brien County. But most of all, I think that if anybody convinced me to do it, I suppose it was my kids. I got two young kids. I got a 12-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter, and they were both extremely gratifying to me. They were very encouraging.
How would you kind of, as a candidate, how would you kind of describe your own worldview?
Well, I am definitely a conservative. I'm a firm believer that our government should comply very literally and very closely with the Constitution. Unfortunately, sadly, we have far too few legislators today that believe that. Um, I'm a believer that anybody who is representing the interest of Americans, whether here in Iowa or at the national level, should prioritize American interests above all others. That's unfortunately not a view that is commonly held amongst our elected officials at this stage, but it's one I believe very strongly. I believe that our federal government has become our greatest national security threat, and because its budget and size and power has become far greater than the founders ever anticipated. And I believe that small businesses are the lifeblood of any economy, especially ours. And we should be doing everything we can to make it possible for the working class, for the middle class in this country to start businesses and build things and achieve financial freedom. And we're not doing that in this country.
What grade would you give the current Republican-held House that you would be hoping to join?
I mean, I wish there was something lower than an F, because I would give it to them. I think that they have done a very poor job across the board of maintaining any sort of veneer of constitutional compliance, right? Our Republican leadership certainly in the House and also in the Senate has just given the corrupt Biden administration everything they've wanted, in terms of huge spending bills, rampant money printing, and increasing power accruing to the federal government, and they've extracted nothing in return, right? We've got an open border. 40% of all dollars in circulation today have been printed in the last 4 years. We aren't really getting the support we need, certainly here in Iowa, for the agricultural industry. I mean, whether it's a farm bill that hasn't passed or certainly any loosening of regulations that are choking out small business. I'm very disappointed. That's a big part of why I decided to run.
Is there any one or two, a couple things in particular you would like to see them do more of that they're not?
I'm generally not excited to see the government, especially the federal government, do more of anything. Right? I would rather see them do a lot less. I'd rather see them tax a lot less. I'd rather see them pass fewer regulations. I'd certainly like to see them hire fewer people. I think we, in general, and I've been saying this in the campaign trail, my pledge to all the voters out here in the fourth district has been, I will never vote for a federal tax increase for any reason. I'm only going to vote for legislation that reduces the power of the federal government.
If you were to win the primary and then go on and win the general in November, what issues would you want to prioritize in a first term when you're kind of trying to hit the ground running?
First and foremost is sponsoring or co-sponsoring any legislation that we could pass that will reduce the federal government's power. I think that's I'm a strong believer in the power of the 10th Amendment, right? Which, as you know, that states that other than those specifically enumerated powers contained and written in Article 1, all of the power should be and must be delegated to the states or to the people. And we've moved away from that in this country. I do believe that the federal government should have a fairly short list of responsibilities to the people. And they're not even such as maintaining border sovereignty and protecting us, which they're not even doing a great job of that right now. Terrible job, in fact. So I'm in favor of delegating many of the rules that the federal government has claimed for itself back down to the states. So I'm definitely going to work to defund a lot of federal agencies that I think are not not helping, and in fact often hurting the American people, and reducing its power and reach, and doing everything I can to return monetary wealth from the government back to the people, right? Through while still making sure that everybody receives the essential services that they need, but just cutting, just the gigantic waste and fraud that exists in our federal government today.
How long would you want to serve for if you did get elected?
Well, I signed a pledge that former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy asked me to sign. He has endorsed me, which I'm grateful for, and I signed a pledge with him that stated I would not serve more than 4 terms, and I intend to abide by that.
You mentioned former Representative Steve King is backing you in the race. Did he reach out to you about endorsing you, or did you reach out to him, or how did that kind of play out?
No, no, neither. If anything, I asked him for his advice when I was thinking about a run, because I got to know him just because I saw that he was leading the charge on fighting efforts by a very politically well-connected company called Summit Carbon Solutions to pursue eminent domain against landowners like my family, right? And I was impressed by the support he was building, or the resistance he was building against that pipeline. And I think it just became an ongoing conversation. At some point I asked him what he thought about it, and yeah, he was, at the end of the day, he was encouraging. So yeah, I think I have learned a lot from him. Certainly, I know, like, I got to tell you, like, having been all over this district, there are a lot of people wish that a lot of people who voted against him in 2020 now have extreme regret that they did. There's a lot of seller's remorse when it comes to Congressman King here in this district.
And then I wanted to kind of switch and ask a few issue specific sort of questions. And the first thing I was curious about, I know about a month or so ago, you and Mr. Feenstra sparred over Israel and who's more supportive of the country. What do you believe the U.S. position toward Israel should be, particularly at this moment where I know just yesterday the AP had some reporting about an airstrike killing 27, and there being some disagreement even among the Israeli government. So what do you kind of think U.S. position toward Israel should be right now?
Yeah, I think that point on Feenstra is, look, there's been a lot of attack ads written about me, almost all of which are, the most charitable thing I could say is that their comments taken wildly out of context, and most of them are just flat out lies. But I think he is clearly and expressed like undying and unending support for Israel, which is his prerogative. Um, I take a more nuanced view. Like, I've been to Israel many times. I'm a huge fan of the place, and understand, and like I'm a Christian, like most people here in Iowa, and there's a very strong affinity toward the Holy Land and toward the Israeli people. I believe they have every right to to defend themselves against enemies, both foreign and domestic, which they're very clearly fighting right now. What I have said is I don't believe that writing a blank check to any country, whether it's Ukraine or Israel or anybody else, when there's no definition of success and there's no prioritization of American interests, that doesn't make any sense to me, particularly when we're $34 trillion in debt. So no, I don't agree with sending billions of foreign aid to Israel, particularly when Israel is a wealthier country per capita than we are at this point. So yeah, I think Feenstra has taken that out of context, basically accused me of being basically a friend of Iran or something insane. One of the most recent attack ads he sent out. But that's obviously false, and frankly, surprised he went there with somebody who's got my service record. But I
Um,
guess
uh,
that's
another
politics.
another back and forth that I know you two had was on the issue of immigration. What do you think U.S. immigration policy should be, and what would you want to push for if you were in Congress?
Yeah, I certainly would have pushed a lot harder than he has, right? He's folded at every opportunity to give more power to the Biden administration and more budget authority while extracting nothing on the border whatsoever. All these tough talk aside, I think lack of action speaks for itself. I would never have voted for a gigantic spending bill, certainly without, holding maybe requiring the Biden administration to conduct a hard closure of the southern border. I think that's a no-brainer, right? We have a federal government now that's not just apathetic about the open border; they're fighting hard to keep it open, as we saw when their ongoing conflict with the state of Texas. So Feenstra didn't vote with the other conservative members of the House who were trying to do that. I absolutely would have. I believe that we need a hard closure of the southern border. I believe that the way to solve our, like the way to resolve this illegal alien invasion we're dealing with right now is to, in my opinion, is to remove the financial incentives that these people have to work here. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of businesses, many right here in Iowa, that are very quietly supporting this invasion of illegal immigrants because they want the cheap labor. So we have to make it extremely painful for them to hire labor illegally. While at the same time, I think we need to make it easier for pre-screened immigrants to come work here, maybe on a short-term basis. With full control over who comes here and who's taxed. I think we need a sensible immigration system. I don't think that people who are calling for mass deportations aren't living in reality, in my opinion. But nor is what we're dealing with right now a sustainable solution. I think we need to end the process of citizenship by birthright, whereby any child who's born here, regardless of their parents' status, is an American citizen. I think that's ridiculous. Only 1 out of 6 countries in the world at this point maintains a policy like that. We're supposed to be the world's most economically advanced country. I think we need to completely overhaul how we choose to which immigrants to come live here. I think the H-1B program is broken. I think short-term visas for the work for working class or low-skilled migrants makes sense for the agricultural industry and other industries to a point. But there needs to be much tighter controls on it. And then finally, all of these companies, these NGOs that are quietly, taking hundreds of millions of dollars of federal funding and grants while subverting our rule of law. I would put a hard stop to that, and I would sponsor or co-sponsor legislation that forever prohibits any of them from receiving federal funding again, or any kind of contract.
With the repeal of the citizenship by birthright policy, do you have any concerns that that bumps up against something like the citizenship clause in the 14th Amendment?
It would require a constitutional amendment to repeal citizenship, because it's enshrined in the Constitution, right? And that is one of the very few clauses in the Constitution that I think that needs to be amended. But it very clearly does, right? We're creating, very perverse incentives for, what they call, for what they call anchor babies to come here and be born. It's disruptive to our economy. It's we're bringing in just people at scale with no controls whatsoever. We're creating this multi-billion-dollar market for human trafficking, which, as you probably know, has one of the highest incidence rates of human trafficking, particularly for underage girls, for women in the country. It's a very shameful thing we've allowed to happen, and the best way we could do that is to make it difficult, if not impossible, for people to come here illegally.
At the state level, there's still a battle over abortion, over the law that would ban most abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy. Do you think that law makes sense? Is 6 weeks the right number? Is that too many weeks? Should it be more than 6 weeks? What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think the right number is, well, I believe that life begins at conception, right? I mean, I'm a pro-life absolutist, and I think that the 6-week heartbeat bill was probably it's undoubtedly what was politically possible to be signed into law here in Iowa, but I think there's more work to be done. That's just my opinion. I do think that President Trump scored a victory, a significant victory, when Roe v. Wade was overturned during his administration, and then that the decision for regulating or legalizing abortion is now being pushed down to the states, because now which I think is where we should be with most, if not all, violent crimes or violent acts rather. And I think that, yeah, I think we're in the right place. I would like to see Iowa, like ban abortion outright. I think it's a heinous act. But we're in a much better place than we were, say, 10 years ago.
Ban outright, including like cases of like threatening to the mother.
No, no, and I think look, I think in those very rare edge cases, right, when the mother's life is at risk, right? I think that's the that's one of those edge cases that we need to maintain compassion for. But for these discretionary abortions, which are 99.5% of all abortions, no, I don't believe this should be allowed.
In the state, and you mentioned it a little while ago, there's been notable opposition, kind of on both sides, to using eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines. And you sort of tipped your hand already, but can you kind of speak a little more on where you stand on using eminent domain for a project like that?
Yeah, I think that well, first of all, I mean, if there was ever any doubt, I'm 100% opposed to the use of eminent domain for the benefit of one private entity over another private individual, right? Which is what the Summit Carbon Solutions pipeline is, right? It's blatantly unconstitutional, and frankly, I think it's un-American, right? We're talking about allowing a politically well-connected company to violate the property rights, violate the Fifth Amendment rights of another, say, landowner. It's completely wrong. And I think it's absolutely shameful that that certain leaders in the state level Republican Party support it, particularly when, a Des Moines Register poll last year showed that 4 out of 5 Iowans opposed the use of eminent domain for the carbon capture pipeline. The voters are smart enough to know that we're not talking about building an interstate highway or a school or something that benefits the public interest. This is just a scam. It's a gigantic, tax credit grab, and it doesn't benefit the people. And I think this argument that this is somehow good for the ethanol industry, it's unfortunate that people actually believe that. I think anybody who takes a step back and looks at what someone is trying to do realizes that it'll actually be incredibly damaging to the ethanol industry because, the biggest operators of ethanol plants, say like Poet and Valero, have signed, purchase and sale agreements of their CO2, whereas many of the independently run ethanol plants aren't able to get the same terms that the big incumbents do, and therefore, if Summit is allowed to build this thing, right, the small ethanol plants will almost certainly have to give the CO2 to Summit, and while Poet and Valero will be able to see it, to expand their margins. And ultimately, what that does is create a competitive disadvantage for the smaller ethanol plants, which can only be bad for the farmer who has to deal with reduced competition when they're trying to sell their crop come harvest time. So I think it's the oldest. It's a story as old as time when you have large politically connected companies using their connections to write favorable legislation for themselves at the expense of everybody else, and that's exactly what this is.
Winding down a little bit, what do you believe differentiates you from your opponent in the primary?
I don't lie every time I open my mouth, for starters, which I think if you look at Randy Feenstra's voting record over the past 4 years, it's starkly different from all the campaign promises he's made, right? I think we've got a congressman in place right now who has voted at almost every opportunity to expand the federal government's power over us, to expand its budget at the expense of us. Whether it's voting to let the federal government spy on U.S. citizens without a warrant, voting for red flag laws for the military, which is a violation of the Second Amendment. And as we'll never talk about these things, and in fact, we'll actually lie about them when asked in a public audience. I mean, I think it's unconscionable. It's a big part of the reason I decided to run in the first place. And then I guess what makes me different is I think 3 things. First off is just my intention to comply with the Constitution and only support legislation that's constitutional and puts America first. The second is a strong interest in reducing, not expanding, the reach of our federal government and returning power back down to the states and our communities. And a third is to do something that Congressman Feenstra never does, or rarely does, rather, and that's to actually go out and meet the people and have legitimate two-way discussions about the issues that matter to them. I think it's unfortunate that he doesn't want to do that, unless it's in a carefully scripted environment. But I intend to operate very differently. So I think that those pledges right there, I think, are why I've gained so much support amongst the voters this year.
What do you believe is the ultimate role of a legislator? What is your responsibility to your constituents?
I think it's to uphold the Constitution, certainly to defend their interests and to to push as aggressively as I can within what's possible in the chaos that is our Congress to pass legislation that improves their way of life, right? But first and foremost is to uphold that oath to the Constitution.
And then another kind of thing I would be curious about in a possible first term for you as a representative, what kind of economic legislating would you want to do?
Well, we talked a lot about my views on the federal government, right? I think, look, I think it's putting it mildly to say that I'm a skeptic of the Federal Reserve and inflationary monetary policy. I don't ever expect to support any deficit spending bill. I'll almost certainly vote against them. And yeah, I would like to see I mean, I know that this sounds like fantasy, but I would like to see a balanced budget within our Congress. I will not vote for continuing resolutions, which is how we've relegated ourselves to passing budgets now, 3 months at a time. I think it's bad government, and I think we already have quite a few members of Congress that routinely vote against those. I intend to be one of them, because I want to see our federal government held accountable to only spending money that it has, right, or that it generates. And I think we could do that by aggressively reducing the federal employee headcount, its budget, and its powers. And that's I think if we do that, many of our like the amount of growth that our economy will see, that will be catalyzed, will solve all of our other problems.
Those were all of the questions that I had on my list for you for today. Between now and election day, what's the rest of the campaign schedule going to look like?
Well, it's it's a lot of time on the road, just like the last 5 months have been. We've got been to every county, all 36 now in the district. So we're going to revisit as many of them as we can. I think I'll be. Yeah, I guess, I'll probably have an event, at least one event, and sometimes two, every, or sometimes three, actually, every day for the next 2 weeks.
What have you kind of learned about the district that maybe you didn't even know growing up just from doing this and from getting out?
Yeah, a lot. I never realized how much wealth disparity there was just across the district, right? Some areas in Western Iowa are doing much better than others economically, right? And there are some external factors that drive that, just the local geography being one. But it's been remarkable to me. I mean, I've probably driven over, well over 25,000 miles just in the last 4 months around the district, and yeah, seeing how some communities are thriving while others are struggling, and then understanding the root causes behind that, it's been very, very eye-opening for me.
Well, like I said, those were all the questions I had for you. Thank you for taking the time out to chat with me. I appreciate it.
Okay, absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks very much.